With the protests in the Middle East, focused on politics, religion, and social media. And first I'm going to kind of go through, do just a really quick run through of just the breadth of what's going on, because in general we have a couple of countries that get most of the attention, and it's an amazing number of countries where there have been some protests over the last 3 months. So I want to hit just a little bit of that because I think it's really important to see how big this is. And I'll admit from the upfront, from the start here, that I'm highly optimistic about everything that's been happening in general. Then I think that what we're seeing is a very positive push for more democratic freedoms. And I do believe that in societies where the people have those free speech, those religious, those political freedoms, that it creates then more opportunities and then also more economic opportunities as well. And so I think that we're seeing a movement that's desperately needed. It's not going to be successful in every country, but I think in general the region, we're seeing some very positive developments. So I come from this very optimistically. And then after we do kind of a quick run through, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of social media, because I think that's really important to think about here. A little bit about issues of democracy, and particularly U.S. reactions, U.S. official government reactions to this, and then end with talking about some issues of religion, and then particularly what this might mean for women in the region as we're looking at the transition in the various countries. But we're clearly seeing that most of the Arab world has seen protesters of at least several hundred, and nearly all of these have had tens of thousands in their protest movements. Very common themes, which I'm sure you notice: economic problems. Particularly, there's no real middle class in most of these nations, and you have a few very, very wealthy, and then everyone else lives in poverty or extreme poverty. And so there's no middle class like what we have in this country and what you see in European and Eastern nations. And so that is really what's driving a lot of this high unemployment, especially among those in their 20s and 30s. Right? So there's no economic opportunity, there's no future for them, and those are the generations that are really leading this movement. Also government corruption, limited political freedoms or democratic opportunities. Overall, we've seen 7,000 to 11,000 people are estimated to have died in the protest, but just barely over 1,000 of those are in the 14 nations I mentioned other than Libya. So that's why I said that nation really is a really different, almost has to be considered entirely different than the others, because the protest movement has been so different. It's really much more of a civil war type aspect, as opposed to a protest movement where there have been some attacks by mobs and some shots by government. But in general, 14 nations had barely 1,000 people have been killed. And so that's kind of the overall of everything that's happening. Like I said, it's very widespread. There's a lot of breadth going on here that I think is missed when the media focuses on about 3 or 4 countries. Particularly, some of these were just barely getting headlines because the protesters would start and then immediately the government would say, okay, we'll make some changes. And so I think there's been a lot of positive outcomes that have come that we haven't had a lot of attention